Buy-to-lets are just not worth it anymore, unless you know what you're looking for. So if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know that I love boring vanilla buy-to-let properties, and there's a reason for that, because I like my passive investments to actually be passive, and I'm just not a believer that any other strategy is passive. That's not to say I don't own HMOs or service accommodation. I do, but they are very much an active income stream to the point where I will fund those deals and somebody else will be actively running them, okay? Because they are not passive income for a long time, I can assure you of that. But buy-to-lets, they've been around for a while, since the 1980s, but it really become popular as a concept in the 90s, where the everyday man and lady could actually own them. And prior, it would be, you have to be rich and buy everything in cash. And the first mortgages came in with Paragon Group and NatWest in 1996, and that's when it really started taking off. Until today, buy-to-lets represent about 21%. Private rental is 21% of the rental sector, with about 14% of all mortgages being in buy-to-let property. If this doesn't tell you about the growth that's there, I don't know what will. Now, why do people not really get excited by buy-to-lets? Because they're fucking boring. They are. They're boring vanilla buy-to-lets. And I'm not being funny. I don't want my retirement fund being exciting. Like, exciting means risk. Okay, service accommodation. I've got some wicked service accommodations that make thousands, and then somebody goes and trashes the whole place and has a party, and I lose thousands. And then it makes thousands, and then winter hits and it's empty, and then somebody trashes it, and then there's a leak. You get the point, right? I'm not saying the other investment strategies aren't great, but don't think of them as an investment strategy. Think of them as a business. This is more like a really good, long-standing, paying bank that actually appreciates over time, okay? That's what we're looking for. So what really makes it a great investment? Because if it's not the highest yielding investment, i.e. service accommodation is probably the highest yielding, followed by HMO, followed by buy-to-let, why would you buy it? Well, as I said, because they're not the same. In 50 years, 100 years, or 200 years, I think people are going to still need a home to live in, and that means that the boring vanilla buy-to-lets are here to stay. So if the rentals are not going to blow our mind and make us financially free like the gurus promise, why would I invest? Well, actually, this might shock you. 80% of your wealth is from what? Capital appreciation, capital growth, capital gains, the value of your property going up through time. Why does this happen? Well, first of all, you've got basic supply and demand economics. The supply of the properties in the UK is here. The demand is up here. If you don't know some basic economics, I'm not calling you an idiot, by the way, but some basic education around it is when demand is higher than supply, eventually the prices go up naturally, right? For example, if I want to sell you this laptop and there's only one of you that wants it, well, there's one laptop, one person. It's really down to what you can afford, right? But what you can afford is perception, because if you can take on debt, then you can afford more, but you don't really think about it until now there's 10 of you in the room. 10 of you want this laptop, but there's still only one. What's the bet that I could get some more money from one of you? Guaranteed. What if there's 100 of you? Okay. Now, what if I told you there's over a 1 million unit housing shortage in the UK? Can we see how the supply demand comes in? That's number one. Next is inflation. Inflation is incredibly high right now, right? Double digits. It's coming down to about 8% now, which is good. We need it to come a bit lower, really. But if you own property, it's very good for you. If you don't own property, you need to be quick, right? Now, think logically. Let's go back to developers. If inflation of wood is 42% higher than a couple of years ago, the inflation on bricks is close to 50% higher. If you don't know, they are the two main materials in building a property, and the cost of labor's gone up due to inflation. What happens to the cost of the whole development? It shoots up. Therefore, a developer has to sell the property for a higher price, right? Yes. So then there's only two situations. If they can sell at that higher price, everything else around it goes up. or they are commanding too much of a price where people just go, no, I'm not going to buy that new build. I'm not going to pay the inflated price. I'm going to buy a second-hand property. So the developer goes, well, we're just going to hold on to the land. We're not going to develop. We'll leave it there. It's called land banking as a strategy, by the way. They will land bank the property and develop in a few years. But now there's even less supply of property. So now the demand is still growing as it grows. There's less supply than there ever was. And then, of course, that naturally increases the prices, and then the developers start again. So hopefully that gives you a really good idea of what we're doing. So one of the best ways to guarantee as close as you can is to put it in a really high demand, high investment in terms of infrastructure that you can look like. So the area that I talk about in Leeds is the South Bank development. It's a 30-year project. It's 350 football pitches in size. It's absolutely humongous, and it's owned by Legal and General. And they're utilizing this to massive developments. What do you think happens to property prices? What do you think happens to rentals over the next 20, 30 years? I don't think it takes a genius to work that out. And that's why Leeds in 2023 has been voted the highest capital growth at 14.9% 2021 to 2022. And a huge part of that is because of that development. Now, one of the great ways of finding these properties is at auctions, probate, and repossession properties. It is one of the only ways you're likely to be able to snap up a good deal in one of these high growth areas. One of the tools I like using is Lendlord. So there's a new update within Lendlord. I'll talk about them a lot on the channel. I use them a lot. I really want to be a part of them long term. Like, we're not there yet, but I'm really excited by it. And they're also today's video sponsor, okay? If you jump on Lendlord, you can actually search your area, do your analysis, which this also does, type in the postcode, make sure your analysis is correct, and then you can search by repossessed property, you can search on auctions to make sure you're setting up these alerts to get access to the best deals in real time. The next thing you want to focus on is the short-term financials. So it depends on your financial situation here. So my active income's relatively high. So I will buy a property that's in negative cash flow. And people are like, what? That's crazy. Well, no, it's not. Think about it this way. If I buy a £200,000 property that is in negative cash flow, so it's losing me £100 a month, why would I care? If I've got ample cash flow, I'm not looking to buy to let to quit my job. Okay, it's like the highest yielding savings account that you could possibly have. Why would I worry about the £100 a month I'm losing, which is only short term anyway, because rents also go up, by the way, interest rates will come down, when I'm focused on the £1,000 a month I'm getting tax free? But you need to focus on the right areas. So if you're not in my situation, what are you going to do? Well, I'm not really caring. Even an average investor that's got 50 grand, 100 grand, no problem at all. You want to make sure it's washing its face. So honestly, if it's making its £100 a month, where you know it can facilitate the debt, facilitate the interest, facilitate any bumps in the road, I would happily buy it. Now, of course, this is not financial advice. It has to be very specific to your situation that you need to be focusing on, okay? But make sure the financials are there. In buy-to-let world, if you're down south, you want to be around that 5%. If you're up north, in terms of yield, if you're up north, you want to be in that 7% yield. Some of the best areas right now are going to be Leeds, Sheffield, Nottingham, and Manchester. Those are the four key hotspots I would be focusing on. Obviously, my favorite is in and around Leeds because all of that disperses and it's got the best predictions right now. But that won't always be the case. Maybe in 10 years' time, I'll be saying Bolton. You got to go to Bolton. You got to go to Blackpool. Now, I'm not knocking those areas, but I want to place my bets on the horse that's most likely to win. Okay, and those are my four hotspots to invest in right now. My personal opinion is for the average investor, you want to find that sweet spot. So most sweet spots are going to be in that £100,000 to £200,000 purchase price range. My personal preference is to be buying stuff in that 100 to 150 grand range. That's what I love. If you shake a tree, it's the leaves at the top that go off first, right? So when there's an economic downturn, the ones that get damaged at the top are the more pricey properties. People go, I can't afford this, I'm going to sell. People that overreach now need to sell, all of that sort of thing. Whereas this 150 grand range is pressure pointed from every single angle. People downsize, downsizing, people upsizing, people getting their first property, buy-to-let investors. And so there's always this pressure towards capital growth and a strong rental return. So I'm aiming in those price brackets, in that sort of infrastructure heavy locations, to make sure you've got the economics there, and I'm aiming for that 7% yield in my areas. That for me is the perfect recipe for long-term success. Now you need to make sure you're analyzing this correctly, and if you've got your own analyzers, that's absolutely incredible. But if not, use Lendlords, and what you can do is, we've actually got a link. It's completely free, by the way. There's some amazing premium features right now, which is, I think you've got a free trial on that as well using this link. But actually, even the free version, it will blow your mind, and it is one of the most comprehensive analyzers, genuinely, that I've ever seen. It doesn't just take account of your first year investment, it looks at your long-term investment over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, based on the assumptions, and it takes account of what I like to call the combined returns of debt, leverage, capital growth, and your rental returns, also factoring in inflation if you want it to. And it's called IRR, that part of the calculator, internal rate of return. Instead of taking my word for it, by the way, if you're not on Lendlord, click the link down below in the description or the comment that I've pinned to the top. You will not regret it, okay? So these are the things that we need to take account of. You need to make sure that you're really factoring in, yes, the macroeconomy, but also the microeconomy, but most importantly, your economy. Look at your personal situation. How does this adapt by you? Are you needing that cash flow? If not, can you suffer a bit of cash flow like me to get the best capital growth areas? That will depend on you. Let me know in the comments right now, what's the single biggest struggle you are having that I can produce some content around that would help you most? So make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell to make sure you're kept up to date with that. And it takes you 2 seconds, but really helps me out if you just tap that like button and move your way to the next video.